second in a series of guitar mods. I'm Lou, the Farbocaster, and this is my Epiphone Les Paul Standard, which was actually the first guitar that I modified. It's my second video, but I modified it before I did the white one. The modifications I did came in two stages. The first was woodworking, and the second was electronics. Let me show you the woodworking first. I've never liked Les Paul necks. I always found them too thick. I prefer thinner necks. So what I did was to significantly take wood off the back of the neck until it fit my hand correctly, made it much more comfortable. And you can see from the V shape here, you can get an idea of how much wood I took off. Now, in the next series of photographs, you're going to see the steps that I used to take the wood off. And let me point out that I did the modifications with a wood rasp that I obtained in the hardware store. This is a regular wood rasp. If you can see it, it has a round side, has a flat side, and it has coarse and fine teeth. It's necessary to use an instrument such as this because the finish on the Epi Les Paul is polyurethane. It's very thick, very hard, and it won't come off with traditional paint thinners. So it's necessary for me to rasp away with this and take off the wood. In the next series of photographs, you're going to see the steps that I used to take it down. Okay, you can see how I'm taking it down successively, more and more wood, until I got all the wood that I wanted, all the finish that I wanted off. Once that was done, I used sandpaper, going from rough to fine until I had the neck just right. And I did most of the work by feel until I was comfortable with the neck. Once that was done, it was time to apply the finish. Now, since it's a blue finish, I had a little difficulty finding the correct color, but I came very close with Stuart McDonald Guitar Stain. I used their blue stain, used 2 coats, as you can see in this next series of photographs. And I came pretty close. And once the color was applied to my satisfaction, it was time to finish it. The finish work was done with Minwax wipe-on polyurethane. This is liquid polyurethane from the hardware store, and it's just about foolproof. No runs, no drips, no errors, as they say. One simply uses a clean cotton cloth or a clean t-shirt and apply the finish in very thin coats. Now, the coats are extremely thin, so it's necessary to apply many of them. I used around 30 coats in all. I did the first 15 coats, flat sanded to take off the lumps and bumps, did 15 coats more until I built up the correct thickness. Now, there is a technique to applying this, and here's what you do. You apply one coat, then using ultrafine steel wool, you very lightly rough up the surface. Now, once the surface is roughed up, it's very, very important that you remove all of the little shards of steel wool. Otherwise, they're going to be stuck under the finish. So wipe it down very carefully using a tack rag. Make sure that you remove every single little sliver of steel wool. Now, I did this 15 times, applying a coat of polyurethane, a very light sanding with steel wool, and then cleaning off with the tack rag. 15 coats of polyurethane, and then I flat sanded using sandpaper. And you can see in this next photograph how the flat sanding came out. Doesn't look too good, does it? Once the flat sanding was done, I applied 15 more coats of the wipe-on polyurethane, as I just described, until the desired thickness was built up. Once that was done, I used wet-dry sandpaper to do the final sanding. I used successive grits of wet sandpaper using the wet sanding technique. Simply soak your wet-dry sandpaper, and I sanded it down until I got the desired smoothness. Now, once you achieve that, it will look a little hazy. It'll feel smooth, but it will look hazy, as you can see in this next photograph. To reiterate, I used finer and finer grits of wet sandpaper, taking it down in successive sandings until I reached the desired smoothness. And once that was done, the final finish was done using Meguiar's Mirror Glaze number 7. This will take off the haze and bring up a very nice shine. You need to rub forcefully, but once you're done, it's going to look great. And once you're finished with the mirror glaze, you're done. Once the woodworking is done, then it's on to the electronics. So the first thing I had to do was to rip out all of the electronics. I ripped out the pickups, the switch, the pots, and all the wiring. I replaced everything with the hardware from Stuart McDonald. I used Stuart McDonald Golden Age humbuckers, which sound pretty good, I think. They have a nice warm sound. If you're interested in a heavy overdrive sound, they do come in an overwound. And if you look at my white guitar video, you can hear how that sounds. It's pretty good overdrive. But these are the standard ones, and it gives a pretty warm sound. In order to do the installation, it's necessary to do some pre-wiring. And the pre-wiring is done on the pots, the potentiometers. It's very difficult to install them one at a time, so my tip is to do the wiring on the pots using a cardboard template before installing them into the body. And you can see on this next series of photographs how I did that. I cut out the cardboard template, punched little holes, pushed the pots in, and then soldered up the wiring. Once that was done, simply dropped them into the guitar body and we're ready to go. Then we drop in the pickups, we install the switches and the jack, and we wire it all up together. Once all the wiring was done, I plugged it in, fired it up, and lo and behold, it worked. And that's how I did my mods on this guitar. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me a message on YouTube, and I'll be happy to answer your questions and explain in more detail what I did. And thank you very much for watching.